Just to give you, I want to say a little bit more. Well, let me say that, our purpose in all this, I'm going to say generally about immigration, is not, as our sort of critics would say, that we're an open borders organization. And I feel like this always needs to be explained when we talk about immigration. We don't have a position on immigration. And I think we've been very careful to say, look, we're not experts in immigration. We're not saying that there should be no immigration, or there should be unlimited immigration, or this is the right level, or that's the right level. What we're saying is we are experts, we hope, in the radical right. We followed these people for 30 years, and we're sort of here to tell you that whatever you think about immigration is a theoretical matter. Is it good in theory? Is it bad in theory? What level's right? Whatever you may think about that, the fact is that the anti-immigration movement, the nativist movement as it exists on the ground, is just filled with people who are bigots, in some cases white supremacists, very, very given to conspiracy theories, and in some cases just sort of off their meds. People who really have their minds. Let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about, because I don't want to feel this is just sort of propaganda about it from the podium here. Jim Gilchrist, one of the better-known leaders of the Minutemen, in fact, first of all, openly tolerated within his campaign for Congress neo-Nazis, people with groups like the National Alliance, A. B, his run for Congress was on the ticket of the American Independence Party. That is George Wallace's party. That's the party George Wallace ran for president as segregationist on. We've got people like Barbara Coe, who's very important. Barbara Coe is the head of the California Coalition for Immigration Reform. She was a critical person in getting Prop 187 passed in California, which was a proposition ultimately basically overturned by the courts, but that withdrew any kind of a whole lot of public services like emergency room services to people who were not legal. It turns out that Barbara Coe, aside from speaking in very nasty, kind of slur-filled ways and constantly about Mexicans and Latin Americans in general, Barbara Coe's a member of the Council of Conservative Citizens. As she finally came out and admitted about a year ago herself. That's the group I mentioned. Blacks are a retrograde species of humanity, and that's kind of the least of what they have to say. Who else? A guy named Joe McCutcheon, who was introduced a few years ago as the head of a brand new group in Arkansas, Protect Arkansas, and was introduced on the steps of the Capitol by a state legislature. This is the guy who's going to save Arkansas from immigration. Well, about within a day, we didn't know McCutcheon, we'd never heard of him at the time. But, I don't know why this work wasn't done by somebody else, but, within a day, we realized that McCutcheon had written a huge series of letters to the editor of Fort Smith paper, his local paper in Arkansas, and what the letters were about was the Jews, right, who control the world, who control the banks, who control the media, and so on. And in addition, McCutcheon had made several speeches, once again, to the infamous Council of Conservative Citizens. Right away, Mike Huckabee backed away from me. They gave a wonderful quote, the governor of Arkansas at the time, saying, I don't drink his kind of Jesus juice. It's hard not to appreciate Huckabee for that. What else? The list goes on and on. Virginia Abernathy was a very, very important person in Arizona when they were lobbying when they in fact successfully passed a certain proposition, a very similar proposition to 187 in California. Just a few weeks before the proposition went to a vote in Arizona, it made the papers that this woman had joined what was called Protect Arizona Now. Protect Arkansas Now is a precursor group. She joined them as their national advisor. Well, come to find out, Virginia Abernathy, once again, member of the Council of Conservative Citizens on their editorial advisory board, and as she said to the papers when she was confronted with this, I'm just a white separatist. I mean, what's wrong with that? There are other things to say about the immigration movement. Let me say very briefly that one of them that we're sort of constantly trying to make reporters and people who are involved in this struggle understand is that there are a series of groups that are completely fake nativist groups formed mainly by FAIR, by the Federation for American Immigration Reform. What they have done is they have created, for instance, a group called Choose Black America. Because of course, if you're a leader in the immigration discussion movement, it's in your interests in a big way to say, I am not a bigot. right? And, the best way to say I'm not a bigot is to have, a black man and a Hispanic woman or whatever maybe standing next to you, and yes, we're all united, immigration is going to destroy this country. So, obviously it's in the interest of groups like FAIR to say, this is what African Americans believe too. It's not a white thing. And, in the case of Choose Black America, it was completely concocted by FAIR. FAIR called up, quote unquote, African American leaders who really weren't leaders at all. In most cases, quite nutty people, like that Ted Hayes, who's now the head of Choose Black America, who's a homeless advocate in LA, but really kind of a nutty character. But in any case, the point was that FAIR simply called a bunch of people and said, will you come to a press conference in Washington? We'll put you up in a real fancy hotel, and it'll be to denounce immigration. It's really important. And then they presented this to the world. And I'm here again to tell you that Choose Black America has never had a meeting other than the press conference. The people involved had never seen each other. And it goes on. FAIR also created a group called You Don't Speak For Me that is supposed to be a Latino nativist group. If you look at it once again for 2 seconds, what you find out is that their spokesman, Ira Melman, first of all, he is not Latino. He is as white as the driven snow, and he is also the spokesman for FAIR. Surprise. I remember there was another one. This was not created by FAIR, but a group called Vietnamese for Legal Immigration. And the guy who headed it was, or presented himself to the press, as a guy named Tim Bin, B-I-N-H. Well, Tim Bin wasn't Tim Bin at all. Tim Bin was a white guy named Tim Drum. And when the very enterprising Oakland Tribune reporter confronted him with this, she figured this out, his response was, well, I really like Vietnamese food. So what I'm saying is that people should not be fooled by this. I'm not trying to say that there's not a large populist anti-immigration movement out there. I think there clearly is. But as I said, when you look at the existing movement on the ground,